Well, here we are at the start of the week. It's the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Pitt is starting its second full week of training camp, really the third week of camp. They started on a Wednesday, so what the heck do we call this? Do we call it the third week of camp, the second full week of camp, day, whatever it is? We've hit the point in camp where we forget what day it is, how many days they've been at camp, what day of the week it is, although we know today is Monday because yesterday was Sunday, and it's easy to keep track after the weekend. But we've hit that point in camp. I mean, we are approaching the midpoint. Maybe this is the midpoint. Actually, if you do the math, figure you got a full week this week, full week next week. I guess we're not quite to the midpoint, but we're approaching it quickly. And either way, this is when camp gets real. I mean, camp has been real for the past week and a half, but this is where they're really getting the work done. So as Pitt enters this third week of camp, this second full week of training camp, what are some of the biggest storylines? What are the big things we're going to be watching this week? What are the big questions that the Panthers need to answer, and what do they need to be focusing on as they move through this week and head toward the final scrimmage of camp on Saturday and then the final week of camp next week? Let's get the week started by setting the table, some of the big topics facing your Pittsburgh football Panthers heading into this week of training camp here on the Monday edition of the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's Monday. It's the Morning Pitt. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. You know the website Panther-Lair.com. It's a place to get all the Pitt sports news, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Pitt football, Pitt basketball, Pitt recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com and message boards to interact with hundreds and thousands of your closest Pitt fan friends. All day, every day, Pitt fans are talking about Pitt sports on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com, and you can be there too. Panther-Lair.com and our YouTube channel right here. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com, the place we put all of our Pitt video content, these daily morning Pitt videos, Monday through Friday. Every day of the week, a little bit of Pitt talk to get your day started. We have our weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. We have post-game shows, press conferences, interviews, all those things right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So hit the like button and hit the subscribe, and you won't miss any of our Pitt video content. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right. It's a new week. It's a new week of training camp. They're at it. They had their first scrimmage of camp on Saturday. That concluded their first full week of practice. Today kicks off the second full week of practice. They'll be back at it after scrimmaging on Saturday. I forget if they had a practice on Sunday or not. I don't think they did. I think they have to go 3 days on, 1 day off, but I could be wrong about that. Although I think that's right. I have to double check on the schedule. But they'll be back at it in the South Side today. They had their first practice their first scrimmage of camp on Saturday. We put some notes and news that we had picked up from that on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. Go check it out. We won't spend too much time summarizing that here because that's on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. But as you get to this point in camp, you come into camp obviously with big questions, things you're trying to figure out about the team, questions the team has to answer, questions you're trying to answer as someone observing the team and covering the team and following the team. And then you get to this point in camp, and some of those questions have been answered. Some of those questions have been addressed. Some of those things we have sort of an idea about. A lot of things have sort of followed along with what we expected them to be. I think the depth chart at this point, and we'll see more today at practice. We'll be down in the South Side this morning. We'll have a full practice report and photos and videos and all those kinds of things. But I think, get a look at things at practice and see today. But I think by and large, the depth chart is more or less what we expected it to be to this point. I don't think there have been any real surprises, on that front. But I think once you get here in camp, when you get to the second full week of camp, when you're really in the mix, you know what I mean? Like you are approaching that halfway point of training camp. You're in the grind. And kind of like I said at the beginning there, I mean, the days blur together. Like what day is it? Is it Monday? Is it Thursday? And I mean, that happens for some of us on the outside, but I think when you're in it, because the players are staying at the hotel right up the street from the facility. The coaches are at the facility all the time. They go home and go to bed and get up. They're back, before the crack of dawn. And so for these guys, it's just all Pitt football all the time, even more so than it is for you and me. And so all the days blend together. And I think what you run into at this point in camp, you hit a really important stretch because this is the real grind of camp. When camp first starts, it's exciting. You're back at it. You're playing football again. You got a long camp, but you got energy. You're ready to go. And I think once you get into next week, those last few days of camp, you're starting to not wind down, but the light's at the end of the tunnel. Camp is almost over because next week they'll practice, whatever up until Thursday or so. They'll have the kickoff luncheon on Friday. They'll be off over the weekend, and then they're into the game week schedule to get ready for Duquesne. So, that's all coming up very quickly. And once, for the players, once they get into next week, they're going to see that light at the end of the tunnel. They're going to know that the end of camp is coming. They don't have another scrimmage. They're just going to be practicing for 3 or 4 days, and then they get the weekend, and then they're into game week. And I don't know, they might have classes. I don't know when classes start this year, but it shifts there. They're out of camp. They're not in it anymore. Right now, where they're at right now on August 11th, they're kind of equal parts away from the beginning of camp and the energy that comes with that, and the end of camp and the energy that comes with that. And so they're right in the middle, and this is when it becomes a real grind. And I think to some extent this is when some of the most important work is done, because this is the point in camp when you have to dig in and really push yourself and motivate yourself. You're going to be banged up. You're going to be tired. You're going to be sort of bored with the routine a little bit. Not that you dislike the work, the film, and the practice and all of that, but it's got to start wearing you down at this point, I would think. And these next few days, I think they practice today, tomorrow, and Wednesday, and then I think they're off Friday, and then they practice like Saturday and Sunday, or they're off Thursday, they practice Friday, Saturday, or whatever the schedule may be. Like, this is when the players really have to dig deep and really find a little something extra to push themselves and motivate themselves to keep working and not lose a step here. And, we heard some not great things about the scrimmage on Saturday. Well, that should be motivation enough to get that energy back up and keep that energy high through this period of, this is the dog days of camp right here. It's hot. It's tiring. You're sore. This is where you really have to dig deep and really hone in on it. And so, one of the biggest storylines for Pitt this week is just the grind, man. Because it is a grind right now. These players are going through it. And you'll find out how they respond and who responds. Because it's easy when it's game day. It's easy. You got fresh tape and, your uniform's all perfect and everything. You got your cool visors and all this stuff. You're ready to go out there. I mean, you are dressed to the nines, you feel fresh, you stayed in a hotel last night, and it's all, it's so exciting and everything, you're ready, it's game day, they're playing music in the stadium. Right now, Monday morning, August 11th, yeah, you're staying in a hotel, but it's the same hotel room you've been in for the last week and a half, and you're going to be in for another week and a half, so a little bit of that luster is wearing off, and it probably doesn't smell very good in there, and you're getting up, and you're putting on those practice clothes again, and you're going out there, and there's no glory, and there's no crowd, and there's music, but it's not a stadium. You're not at Acrisure. You're just putting in the work so that when you get to Acrisure, you're ready to go, and you're ready to play at a high level. The work that's done now is what really sets the table for what you're going to try and do over 12 Saturdays this fall. And so that's one of the biggest storylines every year at this time. How do the players respond to the grind? Because that's what it is right now, more than it was in the last week and a half, more than it's going to be in the next week and a half. It's a grind right now. More position specific, I think we need to start hearing some good things about this offensive line. And I think we need to start seeing this offensive line as much as we can see it. I think the coaches need to start seeing this offensive line come together and sort of gel and play at a high level and execute at a high level. I mean, we've talked all offseason about how important this offensive line is, about how they've got to be better this year than they were a year ago. Not just the injury part of it where, they lost Branson Taylor and it messed everything up. We talked plenty about that. But they've got to be better just overall. It can't just be that, like last year, I think we looked at it and said, well, I think their starting five is okay, but boy, the depth doesn't seem good. And that was ultimately proven right. And what they need this year is not only they need the depth to be better, but they also need the starting five to be better. And I think that's something they're wrestling with right now. And they've got time to get it settled. They've got time to get it figured out. but they need to start taking steps in the right direction. And, feel good about Lyndon Cooper. I think Ryan Baer's pretty good. I think BJ Williams is good. Like, you need that left side to settle in. And you need all of them across the board to play better and really start taking steps forward. This next week and a half is crucial for that offensive line to come together and be ready to play at a high level right from the jump. Like, they should go out there and just on the virtue of ACC versus FCS, push Duquesne around. And if that doesn't happen, we're going to blame it on the scheme and the vanilla offense and all that kind of stuff. And when it doesn't happen again against Central Michigan, we're going to blame it on the scheme and the vanilla offense and all that kind of stuff. And then they're going to go to Morgantown, and they're either going to show that it really was the scheme and it was a vanilla offense and all that kind of stuff, or they're going to get pushed around. There's going to be a real problem this year. That group, as much as any other, because we've talked about them, but I wouldn't say we've danced around it, but we've just said, yeah, and the offensive line needs to get better. Like, no, they probably more than any other group on the team need to take a step forward this season. And that work has to be happening this week. Like, this week is a huge week for the offensive line to really start locking in, heading into that final week of camp next week. And I would say the quarterback position too, and specifically Eli Holstein. Like, we need to start hearing and seeing some big-time stuff about Eli Holstein. And like, what are we going to see? It's, whatever highlight films they put out on Twitter or something like that. But we need to start hearing from people around the program that, like, look, this guy is locked in and playing at a high level. I wrote something last week, forget if it was after Thursday's practice or Friday's practice, effectively saying that, like, you know what, maybe Eli Holstein is just a gamer, right? And we use that term, and it's not entirely a term of endearment. This idea of a player who goes out and maybe isn't so hot in practice and maybe misses throws in practice and, seems to do well in the film room and knows what he's supposed to be doing, but doesn't always translate to practice. But then when he gets in the game, is just able to find another gear, turn it up another level, and play at a higher level than you expected him to based on what you saw out of practice. And, like, last year, that translated into some pretty heroic performances. Times when Eli Holstein put this team on his back, made some big-time plays. He wasn't alone in doing it. Desmond Reed made some big-time plays, but Eli Holstein got the ball to him. Kanate Mumfield made some big-time plays, but Eli Holstein got the ball to him. He was able to turn it on. He was able to be a gamer. And maybe that's what he is. Maybe that's the kind of player he is, that he's just, just when the lights go on, he takes it up another notch. And that's cool. It's not exactly something you can rely on or something you want to rely on. It's good if it's there. You'd rather that than the other way around, that a guy looks great in practice and when the lights go on, he's just ineffective. But your best case scenario, and what I think they'd like to see out of Eli Holstein, is really high-level, consistent play in practice, because that gives you that much more confidence in what you can do in the games when the lights do go on. And I still believe he's capable of making those big plays in games and winning games. I still believe that a number of those games that Pitt couldn't finish in 2024, like we had an article yesterday on Panther-Lair.com about just an inability to finish and how important finishing is as a concept for this team and how much they're focusing on it. The players in particular finishing better than they did a year ago, that they didn't finish drives well enough. They didn't finish games well enough. They obviously didn't finish the season well enough. And I still believe that they probably would have finished the games better against Clemson, Virginia, Toledo, and Boston College better than they did. They had fourth quarter leads in 2 out of those 3 games. They had second half leads in 3 out of those 4 games. And Boston College was the only game they didn't lead in the second half, but they were down by 3 in the third quarter. So, very much in striking distance. And I think with Eli Holstein, and this is not putting the blame for all of that on Nate Yarnell, but I think with Eli Holstein, they win at least 2, if not 3, or maybe even all 4 of those 4 games we're talking about. And then you're looking at 9, 10, 11 wins as opposed to 7. So I still believe in what he can do when the lights turn on. I still believe in what he can do in games and that he can be that kind of player, that gamer. But you'd like over the next week and a half, and really starting here with this third week of camp, this second full week of training camp, you'd like to hear a little more that he's doing it in practice, because he didn't really do it in the spring. And I think he's been up and down so far in training camp. Not so much to lose his job or anything, but I think he's been a little up and down, and he needs to be a little more up, so you feel more confident about, him being up when the season comes, even though I'm confident about him being up when the season comes. All right, and then the other thing I think I'm really interested to see this week is if we start to pick up on some separation at defensive end. We talked about these guys so much. We've talked about the transfers, Blaine Spires and Joey Zielinski and Jaden Moore. Talked about Jimmy Scott coming back. We don't really talk about Nate Temple very often, but he's there. And then, younger guys, Maverick Grazio or Zach Crothers or whoever it might be. We need to start seeing, or I'd like to start seeing, some separation there and getting a real sense that a few guys are pulling away from the others. And I mean, I think your top four is going to be some combination of Spires, Zielinski, Moore, and Scott, with Nate Temple hanging around there somewhere. And so, I mean, there's a little bit of separation that's already kind of happened there, I think. But, really kind of getting a sense of who the best guys are. Jimmy Scott's the best returning guy. Is he one of the best now that you have three new teammates playing with him, and Moore and Zielinski and Spires? Or does he slide down maybe to the number 3 or number 4 spot? If so, I think that's interesting. I'd like to, get a sense of whether those transfers are passing Jimmy Scott, or if they're who is emerging and being on Jimmy Scott's level, who is lining up behind Jimmy Scott. So we're going to really keep an eye on that this week and really kind of ask and see what sort of separation is happening there, knowing full well that those guys are going to rotate. You're going to have them all on the field at different times in different combinations. They always have rotated defensive ends here. Some guys will end up with a few more snaps than the others, but all four, your top four, are going to play quite a bit every game. And so separation is what it is, but I'd like to get a sense of who kind of within that top four is really sort of standing out and separating themselves. So we're going to be looking at that this week, talking to the coaches and players about it and seeing what we can find out and dig up about the defensive ends. So those are some of the big ones that I'm interested in, that I kind of want to see what happens this week. I think you need some big steps forward from the offensive line. I'd like to see some separation from the defensive ends, a little more consistency from the quarterbacks, particularly Eli Holstein. And then just how does this whole team handle the grind? Because they're in it now, man. They're in it. The heart, the depths of training camp, the dog days of training camp in August. And let's get it going. All right, we'll be in the South Side this morning for training camp practice number whatever it is. So keep an eye out later this morning for our training camp report, and then practice videos and photos and Pat Narduzzi interview and press conferences and all that kind of stuff. We'll have it at Panther-Lair.com. We'll have it at YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We'll be all over the place with Pitt content, so catch up with it everywhere. Panther-Lair.com, and right here, YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Thanks so much for watching today. I hope you had a great weekend. Enjoy your Monday. Get your week off to a great start, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pit right here, YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com.